Good morning, colleagues, or good afternoon, wherever you may be. It's great to be back. It's a little bit deja vu just at the moment, and I think back to when we started doing these sorts of videos because people were learning from home and, you know, there was lots of complexity around. It seems we're back there again. Anyway, happy opportunity for us to get back and do what we like to do, which is talk at a high level around education. I must admit I was surprised by your phone call last night, and I'll let you set it up, but it's good to be back and talking about important stuff.
Well, James, we have a really close alignment generally in our thinking around education, but last night I set you the challenge: if we were going into a school tomorrow, what are the top 5 areas that you would prioritise focusing on to really get the school flying? So today we're going to go through your top 5 versus my top 5.
Now, I think it's important to point out here, and you both of us had the same, approach to this, but we're not talking about teaching and learning. That is, of course, the most important thing, that what happens between the teacher and the people in the classroom on a daily basis is by far the most important thing for all of us. But there are systems and processes and structures that sit around all of that, and I guess that's where we're talking to today.
Yep. And look, now that we get to go head to head, I think this is going to be great fun. I really think that by the end of it, the people are going to realise that you're as intelligent as you are good looking, and they'll know that I'm right.
And I'll know that you're right. Okay, good. Yeah, that I think. Thank you. Yeah, no. All right, let's go. Let's do it.
We've got you and I head to head looking at the big 5 of school improvement. The one that I'm going to start with always is vision. You've heard me waffle on about this for years now. I believe that a school that doesn't have direction absolutely will not go anywhere in the short term, medium or long term. The model that we advocate is a window of certainty, giving the school vision, the mission statement or purpose statement, values, beliefs and outcome, and that really establishes a clear way to lead the school and will create that sense of unity and collective efficacy and guide your decision making.
And it's a bit deja vu because it takes me back to about a year ago when we started talking about vision, when we were sort of guiding schools through the situational analysis. And we spent a lot of time on that, and rightly so. It's really, really important. I probably wouldn't go there first. I would probably, I think I would start through the lens of school culture. Now, it's almost the same thing, right? You've just started on paper and I've started with the people. But we're still looking for that sense of how a place operates, how people talk to each other, what their aspirations are, whether or not everyone's on board with your vision or not. I've got a friend, a common colleague of ours, who believes he can understand how a school ticks just from looking at an assembly. Now, obviously, he's exaggerating, but what a great little litmus test that is. You know, how do people interact with each other? How do student-teacher interactions play out? How do staff interact with each other? How do the executive interact with the remainder of the staff? School culture is all-encompassing, and if you actually open up the School Excellence Framework, you'll probably find elements of school culture in just about every element of the SEF.
And James, I think what we've really done is talked at the same level here. But the most amazing thing I heard through all that is you've got a second friend.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring in the number 2. For me, this is a pretty simple one. We need to define our curriculum. And it's not, for me, that's more than just the syllabus. We need to know what we're going to teach, when we're going to teach it, but we also need to know the benchmarks in our curriculum. Where do we expect a child to get to by the end of year 2? Where do we expect the year 9 student to be in history? We need to be really clear and articulate that so that our staff and our students know what's expected to be learnt and when.
I'm glad you called this one out, and I'm glad it's early. Again, it's probably not where I would go second, but I mean, all of these are contextual. But having that shared understanding, I'm glad you called it out because of collective efficacy, right? a shared understanding of how we do a particular job, whether it's reading groups, whether it's whether it's HSC writing, doesn't matter. But having a common approach across a school, having a common approach across a community of schools, even more powerful. But that certainty that people have about how we get jobs done, and that allows me to value add to your work, you to value add to everyone else's work. So it's a really important thing. And look, highly linked to the CEF too. We talk explicit teaching. Curriculum itself is a huge element in the CEF when we're looking at self-evaluating. And the systems and processes that sit underneath that and govern the leadership of it is too. I haven't put it there because I've put student wellbeing there. Now, have you heard my wonderful Apple Watch metaphor?
I have. Let's close those rings.
Close those rings. I love it, and those who have one of these gadgets probably understands what I'm talking about. But the idea, it's an infographic, but it's also a logic model. You've got to close the inner ring standing up. You've got to be standing up to be moving. You've got to be moving to be exercising. You've got to be exercising to burn the kilojoules. And I just love the way that you have to do the first one to do the second one and to do the third one. And I see student wellbeing, if we imagine that those rings are the school, attendance is probably right in the centre, well-being around that, because you have to be there. You have to be in a receptive and engaged state as a student, don't you? So I see, and before you even plan brilliant lessons, it could be the best teacher in the world teaching the best lesson in the world, but if the student isn't in a receptive state of mind, not feeling safe and happy and engaged, they're not going to learn that lesson.
And James, you've always said this one, and I have to admit, student attendance was one that I had about 6. So I'm glad that you've called this one in quite early. That Maslow's hierarchy of needs, certainly, if a student's not feeling safe, secure and happy, they're not going to learn effectively.
Yeah.
All right, let's have a look at number 3. So for me, that one is defining our pedagogy. That's understanding the way we expect our teachers to teach, given components of our defined curriculum. Now, I don't believe that any school or any teacher should use only one form of pedagogy, but I think we should be really explicit. Now, in a primary setting, that might be, how do we teach a literacy lesson in Year 2? That needs to be known, explained and embedded with the staff. Or it could be in Year 11, how do we define the way we teach an extended response in PDHPE? But we've got to be really clear in what's our pedagogical approach. We know, and there's abundance of research that shows when we train students that we're clear on how we teach and we're consistent, they understand what we're trying to get out of them, and they go along and they know, they game the education system, they know what we're looking for, and they play their part.
Yeah, look, I guess I called out some of those elements when you were talking about curriculum, and that's fine. That they're very closely aligned things. So I guess you're making the even more granular distinction here about how it gets recorded, how it gets taught, and so on. And I think, look, that's a really good call out. Look, I'm glad you defined pedagogy, because I'm going even harder on this one, and I'm actually calling out literacy and numeracy. So specifically, the English syllabus and the mathematics syllabus. Look, you've got to consider why they are such big targets and why there's a national program set up just to measure them, right? They're big ticket items. They're tickets for kids to transcend the parameters of equity. Being literate, being numerate is a ticket for all the right reasons to change your future. So they sit there, there's an ethical and a moral centre to this, apart from just the fact that they underpin all the other areas of the curriculum as well.
So I'm Year 12 engineering teacher, James. Tell me why I should be focusing.
Well, you're going to have to do an HSC on it, and you're going to have to write about it, and you're going to have, I guess, the background mathematics from primary school that enables you to even consider that choice of subject. So that's why it sits. It was a good question.
It goes against everything I believe, being an enabler of you. All right.
No, but there's more. Look, and my favourite example is great musicians. I dabble in the fine art of music. But even if you were the ghost of Jimi Hendrix as a Year 12 student, you would still have to write about that at HSC level. So just, literacy, numeracy, your guided reading groups, your approach, your whole school approach to it, the collaborative practice that sits around it, they're big ticket items.
Of course they are. All right, my next one is probably, anybody who knows me would have been surprised I haven't already said it, is data systems. When we talked about defining curriculum and whereabouts you expected every student to be at any given point, you've got to have a quality data system informed by formative assessment, and your data systems are something, the more that you mature, the more you can drive improvement. I often talk about, we value what we measure and we measure what we value. It doesn't matter whether we're looking at attendance, whether we're looking literacy and numeracy. Once you create the culture in the school that we measure things using the right metrics, we focus on it, we use that to inform our teaching and learning, whether that's intervention, whether it's gifted and high potential, quality data systems will make a huge difference to improving a school.
And look, we live in a golden age. We've got Scout at our fingertips. We have things like Excel spreadsheets. When you and I were young whippersnappers, we didn't necessarily have that set of tools. I remember doing that sort of thing by hand. You're older than me. But the data system, and we can use data so flexibly now. I mean, you talked about professional learning. Data informed professional learning. What's the school's data around reading, for example, say the missing elements of our reading program are, and therefore what we should be engaging with in professional learning and so on. So no argument from me.
All right, so let's have a look at yours.
Look, this is a bit of an overall one, and it cuts to all elements of the School Excellence Framework, but I want to know how things get done around here. So I've just loosely called it workflow, but it's a little bit of how the supervisory practices set up, things like regular data meetings, things like collaborative programming, things like having regular executive meetings that discuss priorities within the school. So it cuts across everything. But I think it's really important from a leadership point of view to have a clear view of how you intend to get work done. Now, we know, just like, where does the rubber hit the road in your school plan? It involves people interacting with each other and getting stuff done. So I like that sort of overall lens. It's covered off in the CEF around, I guess, loosely leadership or resources, or probably both. And look, I just think that understanding how you're going to get something done is as important as the work itself.
Okay. That brings me to my final one. And this, for me, is really interesting because empowering students is the term I've used to capture a broad range of thinking, and it's something that we as a department are still struggling with. Schools are just starting to get some traction, and it's certainly something that I didn't deliver on in the way I'd like as a principal. So by empowering students, I think the days of students sitting there just being receptive sponges are gone. We need them active and engaged in the learning. I envisage a school where students are walking through the gate knowing what they need to learn, how they're going to learn, and they're really driving it. We know Hattie's work around students self-assessed and reported grades, and yet we know that has the largest effect size, and we still have teachers writing school reports. My school, if I'm really going to drive it, I'm going to focus on that as my fifth element so that students are setting their own learning plans, they're reporting back on the progress, they're informing through their own formative assessment where they need to go next. And once we empower students, I think the potential is just endless.
And I'm glad you brought it up. And I think back to that, we did a bit of an unpack of this recently, and there's those great CZ papers on this. Yeah. Sense of belonging, advocacy, and high expectations. And that's the starting point. That really good research in there, condensed so that you can understand it quickly, but a really good way to kickstart a conversation at your school about empowering students.
And I love going into some of my local schools, and students as young as year one, you say, tell me about your learning goals, and they can just rattle it off. That's the start of it, but we've got a long way to go. Mm-hmm. All right, Your final one, see if you can close the gap.
It's the vibe. It's the no, it's not. How do you work? We've spoken about 9 things so far. Which is more important than the other? Who cares? They're all vitally important. They're all essentially approaches to interpreting the school excellence framework. They're all essentially pathways to school improvement. So I guess, how do you put all of that thought into business as usual? How do you make sure that you make good decisions and embed that as a system? And that is, of course, school planning. So, that going through the cycle, situational analysis, writing a strategic improvement plan, annual reflection, external validation to pull it all together at the end and the beginning of the cycle. The way that's all set up now, I think is so much more logical and has a flow about it. But my big question is, how do you build that into the way you work every day, every week?
I love that you brought that up. Earlier you spoke about collected efficacy. When we talked about a commitment collective, so I think you can take these 10 items and smush them together, but then it's getting that commitment collective from all of the stakeholders, and any principal who's doing that is going to be one of our ambassador schools in no time.
Yeah. Yep. So that's good. Yeah, I like that. Good sales pitch there.
That'll do.
So to finalise, your 5 were good. Mine were possibly better, but it's good that we're able to have this sort of conversation. What a great time, sort of over the hump of the middle of the year. We're moving towards that annual reflection phase now. So it's a good time to pull this stuff out, dust it off, have a look at it. Is it hitting goals for you and your school?
If you think we've missed something, please throw it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. All right.
Take care.